Good morning, dear Sangha, dear friends. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. Perhaps we can start the Dharma talk today with 3 sounds of the bell. We'd like to invite everyone to come back to our breathing, sitting in an upright but relaxed posture. So whether you're on a chair or on a cushion or sitting in front of a computer, you can still sit upright, shoulders relaxed. You can close your eyes, and we enjoy 3 sounds of the bell. So today is the 21st of June, the year 2020, and we are in the Assembly of Stars Meditation Hall in Lower Hamlet, Plum Village, France. It feels good to be able to just spend a few moments to come back to our breathing, just enjoying being with our body, being with our breathing, a few moments of relaxation. I know that much has been going on in the world in the last few months. With the pandemic, and which has exposed many of the different kind of fault lines in the way we organize ourselves and our lives, our society, our economy. And so there's a lot of suffering coming up from that. And also I come from America. So in the last few weeks, I've also been following the news and all of the protests going on in America. And so I've been also a bit in touch with the suffering that's going on in that area and the suffering that's coming up in myself. And so there's a lot coming in from the outside, a lot coming in, a lot of news, a lot of suffering, but at the same time, a lot of good things happening, a lot of good news coming in as well. And even within our community, there are things that are going on. So I'm just sharing a little bit about what I've been processing for the last few months, last few days or so. In terms of the community in Lower Hamlet, we're also experiencing a bit of unemployment as well. We're not receiving guests like we normally do. And also, I have a number of older sisters who have asked to be on sabbatical, who are away. I have one older sister standing. I'm very grateful for her that she hasn't asked to go off somewhere to rest or be on sabbatical. A lot of suffering is coming up. And I also have some younger sisters who are asking to be on sabbatical or resting. So I felt yesterday while I was going through my day, a lot of this has come up. A lot of the suffering from the past few months or the past few weeks or days have come up, and I felt it was weighing down on me a little bit. It was impacting my day, my mood. And so during the walking meditation with the Sangha yesterday, I joined only partly and a little bit not even halfway, I kind of took a detour and went off by myself on my own because I felt I needed to process something that I didn't know if I could do it while walking with the sisters and some of the lay friends. And so I went off to pick some mulberries. We have mulberries that are ripe in our trees. Normally these trees, at this time of the year, we have some children coming and you would see children climbing all over these mulberry trees. It's quite fun to witness. Now there are no children, but I was one. So I pretended to be a child picking mulberries yesterday. And then as I was walking back to my quarters yesterday, just coming back to my steps, coming back to my breathing. For a good number of steps, I really felt that I was there just for the walking, I really made sure that I could feel the contact that my foot was making with the earth. And I made sure that I was with my breathing. And just each step that I made like that, I was trying to just relax my body. And really coming back to just feel how it felt like to walk, to make that contact on the gravel or the grass. And just letting my eyes take in all of the greenery that's available around here. And I'm very grateful that we live among trees. So I was letting all of those things come in and really feeling my steps and allowing me to just be relaxed in the present moment, just coming back to my body, focusing on my breathing and the relaxation happening in each step. And after a while, a question. So I was able to access some peace and some joy and some happiness. And when I was almost back to my quarters, then a question came up. And I said, so all the suffering that's happening, whether outside of the community or inside the community or even inside myself, how can that take away from me enjoying walking in this present moment? Was it able to strip my capacity to walk peacefully in this present moment? And the obvious answer was no, because I just experienced some moments of peace and joy and happiness just by allowing myself to come back to the present moment and come back to feeling my feet touch the earth, feeling my body relaxed, enjoying the ability to be able to breathe freely. I don't have allergies this season, and I'm very grateful. My nose is not running. Maybe all the flowers that have caused my allergies are not around. So I was just feeling very grateful to be able to breathe take some breaths like that, and being very grateful to have lungs that are in good function, good working order. So I felt it was a moment that just reminded me once again that although the suffering is there, we may experience some suffering. Suffering may be present in the present moment, but that's not all there is. While the suffering is there, while the difficulties are there, while the afflictions are there, but also the peace, the joy, the happiness is also there, and it's also available. And so for the first time, I felt I didn't have to get rid of the suffering, or I didn't have to transform completely my suffering or my difficulties in order to access peace or joy or happiness, that I could do it. I could do it by allowing myself, making the choice to come back to the present moment, making the choice to water the seeds of joy and peace and happiness at that moment. And that's not to say that we are forgetting about the suffering or kind of bypassing our suffering. It's that we have to remember that while suffering is there, peace and happiness can also be available. So I was touching a little bit that choice yesterday, and I realized how important it is for myself to kind of have a bit of sovereignty over what is happening around me, whether that's a suffering that's coming up in me or in the community or in the world, that I don't see myself as a victim of circumstances or and I'm able not to see myself as a victim of circumstances because I'm able to come back and access peace or happiness right here. So to regain a bit of sovereignty over what's happening right now within or around me. So that was my practice yesterday. I wanted to share a little bit about that. I've been also reflecting a bit how there is a bit of unrest. I could feel it in the community, a bit of craving. And I see it too when I read the news or see some videos on the internet, that there's kind of a craving for normalcy. We're all having a bit of that craving. We want to get back to normal. We want to be able to go about our days without thinking about the pandemic or the protests or etc. Some of us, we really crave for normalcy. In Plum Village, there's a bit of craving for normalcy as well. When we can reopen and receive guests again and things like that. Or right now, our community is looking into organizing retreats online, and it's something a bit new for us. So some challenges have come up. Last night we put up the registration for these online retreats. So the registration is open right now for the online retreats. We are experiencing a bit of some challenges because this is a whole new forum, a whole new world for us to offer retreats. Normally, we love offering retreats here in Plum Village or on site in our monasteries, or sometimes we go outside and offer retreats at different places around the world. So for us, that's normal. Being with people, being on the grounds, being to be able to connect and listen to everyone's stories, being able to just share about our practice and the Dharma with people live in person. That's our normal. So we are a bit craving some of that too. Also, just interactions among the three hamlets. Right now, we are still doing our best to protect each other, and also to protect those who are on the front lines right now, and save them some work, I guess. To be able to not burden those who are working so hard day and night on the front lines. So we as a community, we're trying our best to protect ourselves. And so we haven't also, among the three hamlets, 4 hamlets here in Plum Village, we have not really had a day where we all got together and had a full day of mindfulness like we normally do. So each hamlet is, we're in our own hamlet today. I'm just speaking to lower hamlet sisters and friends, and I'm very happy to be able to do so. It's a different feel. Normally when you're sitting up here, then you see the hall is packed with people all the way to the back, to the back wall, and sometimes on the veranda. But we don't have those days of mindfulness now. So there's a bit of craving for normalcy, I must say, and it's quite strong in the community too. So I can imagine how strong it is in households all over the world, and in companies or in different places. And but at the same time, I feel quite grateful that we do have this time of lockdown and a bit of isolation. And because we're not experiencing normal, we have a chance to see what normal is. What is it that has been feeding our joy or our happiness, or the kinds of things that have been feeding our suffering? And we're very lucky here in the community that we have discussions and different ways of looking at what normal is to us. And when we speak about normal, we always have kind of we want to measure normal in terms of peace and happiness. We don't just want to follow any kind of normal, but we want our normal to include plenty of peace, joy, and happiness. So right now, for any one of us craving to go back to normalcy, maybe the question to ask is, does our normal allow us enough peace and happiness? And because sometimes we just want to go back to normal because it's easier. It's what we know. It's the easiest path. It's so easy. That's what we know. Going shopping is what we know. Hanging out at the bars is what we know. So it's easy to want that again, and to think that that would restore our just going back to normal will be able to restore our ill-being, what we're feeling that's not going on well within us. Sometimes we think, oh, if I could just go back to normal, I'd be better. But sometimes our normal is probably with a lot of tension and we didn't realize it. But we still want to crave to go back to normal. A 9-to-5 job that probably stresses us out. Like 6 hours of the 8 hours that we work. So kind of taking some time to examine what normal is to us, and seeing whether or not we have the courage to let go of normal. And also seeing whether we have the courage to realign our normal with our deepest aspirations. I think it's a good, the pandemic and all of the circumstances happening right now is offering us a huge opportunity to re-examine normal and to have a moment, have the chance to make choices, especially choices that will allow us to realign with our deepest aspirations. Like for those of us who have the deep aspiration to love, whether it's to love our family or to love our children, to love our community, to love all beings, we can look at our normal and to see the things that we do every day. Is it in alignment with this deep aspiration to love? The things that we say, the things we think about, the things that we do. Do we have the courage to realign normal with our deep aspiration to love? So I hope we all have some time to do that. Take some time to do that. I spoke about some of the suffering happening earlier, and just this craving for normalcy. We're quite lucky in Plum Village that we have this wonderful practice called no waiting. No waiting is just another way to say it's possible to enjoy the present moment at any time, anywhere. So here it's we're quite lucky that we have this practice that is quite deeply embedded in our daily life, in our daily activities, in our daily way of being, so that it's a bit easier for us to manage the craving for normalcy or waiting for the pandemic to be over, things like that. Waiting for the world to get better. We don't have to wait. In this moment, we can, each one of us, we can access peace right away. Each one of us, we can access happiness right away. When we have a chance to come back to the present moment, coming back to our breathing, bringing the mind home to the body, we also have a chance to get in touch with what's going on. And what's going on can be either suffering that's going on, and it's easy to detect. Our minds are quite trained in used to picking up suffering. But the other part that's going on is the wonders of life, the conditions of happiness that we have, and they're always available. So we have to train ourselves to be able to recognize and access all of the conditions of happiness that we have right now. The trees, our children. This orchid is quite beautiful right here. I didn't expect to see an orchid today, given that we haven't been out shopping or things like that. It's an unexpected gift, the orchid. So we have plenty of conditions of happiness available, and training ourselves to be able to access them, so we can enjoy what's there, and also have some kind of sovereignty. I wanted to keep the talk very short today, but there's one more idea I'd like to introduce to you. I thought about what was going on in our community as well as in the world right now, and just what was the news that I've been following and the different things that I've been seeing. I just thought that what's helpful are kind of suggestions, I guess, real actions for healing. And what would those actions look like? So of course in Plum Village, there's so many things we offer, quite a lot of very concrete things that we can take into our daily lives to be able to take care of the suffering that's going on. But today I will just narrow it down and share with you about Bodhisattvas. We have a practice we call invoking the names of the Bodhisattvas. It's in our chanting book. You can probably also find it on our plumvillage.org website. So the idea of a bodhisattva, for those of you who don't know what bodhisattvas are, I think most of you do. Bodhisattva is anyone who is awakened or enlightened, or an awakened being, an enlightened being, or someone who has courage, compassion, insight, love. Before, I guess I should write the word on the board. So in Buddhism, we have the term bodhisattva. And bodhi means enlightened or awakened. And sattva just means being. You can say living beings or sentient being. Before, some schools of Buddhism, they say a bodhisattva is someone who is a living being or a sentient being who is on the way to enlightenment or looking for enlightenment, looking for awakening, on their way to being a fully awakened one or on the way to being a fully enlightened one. and that is the definition of Bodhisattva for some schools of Buddhism. As you know, in Plum Village, our motto is there's no way to enlightenment. Enlightenment is the way. So already, if you are on the path to being enlightened or awakened, you are already experiencing enlightenment or awakening. There's no end destination of fully enlightened or fully awakening that we have to get to. But and so Bodhisattva in the Plum Village tradition would be any awakened being, any enlightened being. It could be small enlightenment, big enlightenment. So any person, anyone who has some kind of awakening to the suffering that is going on in the world, anyone who has any kind of insights to the suffering that's going on right now, whether it's in ourselves or in the world around us, and also making a commitment to do something about that suffering. So that person could be considered as a bodhisattva. And so when we understand bodhisattva in that way, we see that there are plenty of bodhisattvas around us. Each one of us is a bodhisattva, and we can also recognize bodhisattvas all around us, not just in our community, but all over the world right now. And so I would just like to read some of the contemplations on some of the bodhisattvas. I would just like to share with you about five bodhisattvas and their different characteristics, what it is that they offer, the kinds of energies and the kinds of enlightenment or awakening that these bodhisattvas offer to our world. And each one of these bodhisattvas we can recognize within us and all around us. So the practice is one that tradition in our chanting book is called invoking the bodhisattva's names. But it occurred to me that the word invoking here, in my novice years, I understood it as just, calling out someone's name, like Avalokitesvara or Manjushri or Samantabhadra, etc. And just saying their names and remembering their qualities. That was what I thought invoking meant. But recently I felt this word invoking is actually a call to action. And each of these, the qualities and each of the energies that are described in this text is a call to action. The actions of body, speech, and mind. And I felt these are the kinds of actions that we need in our world right now for our healing and also for our transformation of the suffering that's going on. So I'd like to take a few moments to read some of the bodhisattvas. We invoke your name, Avalokitesvara. We aspire to learn your way of listening in order to help relieve the suffering in the world. You know how to listen in order to understand. We invoke your name in order to practice listening with all our attention and open-heartedness. We will sit and listen without any prejudice. We will sit and listen without judging or reacting. We will sit and listen in order to understand. We will sit and listen so attentively that we will be able to hear what the other person is saying and also what is left unsaid. We know that just by listening deeply, we already alleviate a great deal of pain and suffering in the other person. Normally, if you read this, you would read this text and then you invite the sound of the bell and you can breathe and contemplate for a moment or two about the text and allow the words to just kind of work itself in your stored consciousness. So Avalokitesvara is a Bodhisattva who has the capacity to listen deeply and to listen just to be able to alleviate the difficulty that's in the other person's heart, the pain or the suffering that's there. And to listen so attentively that you hear not just what's being said, but everything that's being left unsaid as well. And so for each one of us, we see how important it is, this quality of deep listening. Each one of us, from time to time, we need someone to be able to listen to us like that, to be able to listen to us without judging or giving us advice, just to listen to understand where we are, what's our suffering, what's going on for us. And so there's a real need in the world, in our community and in the world, for deep listening. And each one of us, our daily practice is to be able to listen to what's going on in ourselves, to listen to what's going on in our body. Practicing mindfulness, being able to come back to our bodies, we can identify the kind of tensions or the pain that's there. Our body also needs us to listen to it. Sometimes we overwork the body. Sometimes we don't allow it enough rest. Sometimes we don't give it enough nutrients. Or the opposite, we give it too much nutrients. And so we have to spend some time to listen to our bodies. And we have to also spend some time to listen to what's going on in our feelings, in our perceptions, also in our consciousness. A lot of the kinds of thinking, a lot of the feelings that we have, perceptions that we have to be able to listen and to understand the nature of the feelings, where they're coming from, the nature of our perceptions. Are they wrong perceptions? So cultivating the capacity to listen to ourselves is very important. And I see in Plum Village, we're quite lucky. We still have many moments throughout the day. Well, every day we have many opportunities to listen to ourselves. And also in the way we organize our lives, we have opportunities to listen to each other in classes or in Dharma sharing, in sharing circles. So we're constantly offering ourselves this quality of deep listening and offering other people the quality of deep listening. With many of the protests that are going on in America right now, I saw some interviews. I was able to watch a number of interviews and clips on YouTube about some sharings about the suffering of concerning racial justice, racial injustice. And what I heard was that from many of those interviews or the sharings was that the Black people in America, they've been speaking out for a long time. And they've been speaking about the suffering for a long time. So much so that many are experiencing some kind of exhaustion over speaking out all the time, but not being heard. the suffering's not heard. So to be able to listen to someone's suffering, to be able to hold a space, provide a space where those who are suffering deeply are able to share their suffering is very important. And I think for our sanghas out there, for our practitioners out there, especially in America, if we could organize deep listening circles just to listen to the pain that's going on, that itself could already alleviate a great deal of suffering. We don't have to do much else, but we do need to listen and to understand the pain. And from that place of understanding, we can take action that's concrete and that can remedy the situation. So Avalokitesvara is a Bodhisattva who could listen deeply. And each one of us, this is the kind of action that we can take right now for healing to happen in ourselves and in our society. I'd like to read the second Bodhisattva's name, Manjushri. We invoke your name, Manjushri. We aspire to learn your way, which is to be still and to look deeply into the heart of things and into the hearts of people. We will look with all our attention and open-heartedness. We will look with unprejudiced eyes. We will look without judging or reacting. We will look deeply so that we will be able to see and understand the roots of suffering, the impermanent and selfless nature of all that is. We will practice your way of using the sword of understanding to cut through the bonds of suffering, thus freeing ourselves and other species. So Manjushri is a bodhisattva who has a lot of insights, who has the capacity to be still and to listen to what is going on, to look deeply into what's going on and to be able to see the roots. Tay often says, understanding sets you free. The Buddha said, understanding sets you free. All of our patriarchs have said, understanding sets us free. So Manjushri is someone who looks, who aspires to understand what's going on. Very often when we look into our suffering, our difficulty, we can, if we have the capacity, that is, to go back and to recognize the suffering and to be there for the suffering. Many of us, we don't do that. The first thing we do when there's suffering is we run away. So that doesn't give us much of a chance to understand the suffering. So for us to be able to do what Manjushri does, to cut through the afflictions, we have to be there. We have to be able to stop the running, to not have aversion to our suffering. So recognizing it and embracing it. And then we have a chance to look deeply into its nature. What's this suffering made of? Sometimes it's made of our views, the kind of suffering we have. Sometimes it's made up of our views and our perceptions. Like I want this body to be healthy forever. That's a kind of view that can cause you a lot of suffering because the body is impermanent. Even, yes, I want the world to be free of pandemic, but our nature is to get sick as well. We're vulnerable to illness. We're vulnerable. Our planet itself is also vulnerable to illness. So we cannot expect that the world would be free of pandemic forever. And sometimes just imagining a world free of pandemic would in itself cause some suffering. So that kind of view. Or views like, oh, this is who I am. That causes a lot of suffering. Because sometimes when someone has a different view about who you are, then you start reacting right away. You don't want that person to see you like that. That's suffering. Or we say, oh, that sister, she's always like that. That's a lot of suffering. So being Manjushri, coming back and cutting through our afflictions, identifying the kind of roots of our suffering. And the kind of views. For me, I like to very often when I'm looking at my suffering, I look at it, well, we have different kinds of concentrations. I'll just name some, like concentration on impermanence or concentration on interbeing or non-self. And very often I would look at my suffering through these lenses, and I could recognize, oh, this suffering is because I've forgotten that things are impermanent, for instance. Or this suffering is because I have forgotten that I'm not a separate self, that this is related to everything else. So viewing my suffering and seeing whether we are seeing our suffering and coming back and recognizing and seeing whether we're caught in the permanence of suffering or the separateness of suffering. And so there are some exercises that can help us with this too. For instance, the exercise on visualizing, like if we have a difficulty with someone, just to be able to visualize ourselves 300 years from now. And it's a quick reminder that how impermanent and fragile and precious our life is right now, and how precious our relationship is right now. So visualizing suffering 300 years from now. Or you can go back and you visualize the suffering 300 years ago. 300 years ago. I do this when I tend to think that, oh, my actions now don't count. That's a kind of suffering too. Like I feel so powerless that I feel, oh, my actions right now wouldn't count. It wouldn't matter. And then I think, oh, this suffering is here because 300 years ago, somebody probably thought this same thing. So nothing was done about it. Nothing was done about it. So there's some kind of suffering that has, you can identify in yourself that's been passed on generation after generation in terms of thinking, speech, and action. You can identify. And because maybe none of our ancestors actually took any time to invest, to work, and to transform those sufferings. So voila, 300 years later, we are going through the same thing. So take some time to look into suffering and see it on a much larger time scale than right now. And it could inspire us to action. Third Bodhisattva. We invoke your name, Samantabhadra. We aspire to practice your vow, to act with the eyes and heart of compassion, to bring joy to one person in the morning and to ease the pain of one person in the afternoon. We know that the happiness of others is our own happiness, and we aspire to practice joy on the path of service. We know that every word, every look, every action, and every smile can bring happiness to others. We know that if we practice wholeheartedly, we ourselves may become an inexhaustible source of peace and joy for our loved ones and for all species. What moves me about this this contemplation is that no act is too small to offer happiness or joy to another person. And the other part that moves me is that when we practice, we become an inexhaustible source of peace and joy. And on my walk back to the quarters yesterday, I felt I was able to touch this a little bit. Because in truth, yesterday I was experiencing a little bit of burnout, just touching so much suffering that's going on around me and in the world. There was a little bit of exhaustion. And however, when I was able to just come back, enjoy my steps, enjoy my breathing, being in the present moment, and experiencing a moment of true relaxation, true rest, and feeling my energy being restored, I got in touch with this inexhaustible source of peace and joy. And I really saw we can access peace and joy. And it wasn't that I would become this inexhaustible peace and joy for everyone. It's that I am capable of accessing this. That joy and peace are inexhaustible. That's what I got in touch with yesterday. That the conditions of happiness are inexhaustible. They're always available. And so when we're able to access them, we also become inexhaustible. I don't know if that makes sense for you. But I was very happy to be able to touch that yesterday. Samantabhadra has always been one of my heroes, I guess. I do recognize many Samantabhadras in our community and all over the world. And everyone could be a Samantabhadra in every single day, small acts that we do. I have sisters who, yesterday I had, when I came back early, I wanted to just take a nap and not eat lunch. And I had two sisters come and knock on my door. It was locked and they knocked anyways. There's no lock in Plum Village. A lock doesn't make sense in Plum Village. So the door is locked and there's like, knock, knock, knock. And I stayed quiet. I was like, the lock must have some kind of function to say, I need to be alone. But it didn't work. So then they went around to my window. So more knocking on the window. And I said, okay, obviously the lock on the door and the closed shutters was not a good enough message. So I thought, okay, well. And then I had a moment where I saw my sisters really being bodhisattvas, because they wanted to care for me. So anyhow, I got out of bed and had lunch with them. It was a very simple thing. They just knocked and offered me lunch, but it offered me a lot of energy. It gave me a lot of joy, and so I had a lot of energy for my nap, which. And anyhow, that was fun. So each one of us, I think we have the capacity to offer a lot of joy and happiness to others around us and to ourselves too. And I think sometimes we have to be a bit creative in our way as well. Now with this new form of interacting, we are, we're lucky here in Plum Village. We have people to interact and offer our joy and happiness too. But for many people out there, maybe one form of interaction is through Zoom. A lot of families, parents cannot see their children or grandchildren, and they can only meet through Zoom meetings. So a lot of families that's their only source of interaction. And some of our friends here, in the beginning, I heard were able to kind of to facilitate, because sometimes in a family gathering, if we don't really know how to structure our time together, it can become like a bit not so nourishing, because we don't know what to do with each other. So if there's a bit of structure to the meetings we have together, we can profit a lot from it. So I just wanted to make some suggestions for families meeting on Zoom, or even ourselves here when we meet with our family on Zoom, is that we have to come prepared. That's the first thing. Always turn on the Zoom meeting prepared to offer something. It could be the sound of the bell. If your family is not too weirded out by breathing together, experiencing a moment of mindful breathing together, we can offer that to our families. One day I had that though. One day I did offer my family, because all of this news that we're following, and we have this group chat. So there's a lot of hot and heavy news that day, and everybody has a different opinion. So, a lot of messaging back and forth about not so good news. And at one moment I said, could I offer the sound of the bell so we can all breathe together for just a few breaths and experience a few moments of respite. And my sisters, they were so cute. They came in right away. They're like, yes, please. And it was in the middle of the night, actually, in Poplar House. And so I took out my bell, my mini bell, and I invited the sound of the bell, and I recorded it, and I sent it to my family, because they're in America, so they're operating at a different time. So I apologize if I woke anyone up that night. But it was nice to be able to offer my family the sound of the bell. So you can offer your family in these Zoom meetings, sound of the bell, or always come prepared to water flowers, to be able to water some of your family members' good qualities. This will also bring a lot of smiles to their faces. And so come prepared, offer flowers, have some questions that you would like to know about your family. Because actually our family members, we think we know them, but there's so much that we don't know. And sometimes many of us were much closer to our friends, strangers, than we are to our blood family members. And that's because we haven't spent enough time to discover who they are, what their interests are, what their values are. We just assume that we know them. So come with questions and a healthy curiosity. And the third element is games. I find that some families, I was very inspired. They were playing games with each other online. And one of our sisters here, her family was very creative, Sister Hinya. One of her brothers made this game and that they were able to play together as a family. And so she benefited so much from it. She asked her brother to facilitate this game with a number of the monastic brothers and sisters. So I was very lucky I got to participate in one of these online Zoom games. And it was very interactive, but I felt, oh, this is a great way to spend time together. And I really felt connected to, to Sister Hinu, her family, her, and also the brothers and sisters who participated in that game. So we can be creative in offering. What I mean is we can be creative in offering joy and happiness to others and helping to alleviate suffering, whether it's through Zoom or in person. So you can be a Samanta Bhadra. What is it that you're offering? What are we offering to each other every day? And you have to be able to see it in concrete actions, words or actions. I'd like to read the next Bodhisattva. We invoke your name, Kshitigarbha. We aspire to learn your way of being present where there is darkness, suffering, oppression, and despair, so we can bring light, hope, relief, and liberation to those places. We are determined not to forget about or abandon those in desperate situations. We will do our best to establish contact with those who cannot find a way out of their suffering, those whose cries for help, justice, equality, and human rights are not being heard. We know that hell can be found in many places on earth. We will do our best not to contribute to creating more hells on earth and to help transform the hells that already exist. We will practice in order to realize the qualities of perseverance and stability so that, like the earth, we can always be supportive and faithful to those in need. Shiti, the Bodhisattva, Kshitigarbha, always moves me. Just the aspiration to be there for the suffering of other people. And of course, this, for us, this has its foundations in our own capacity to be there for our own suffering, our own difficulties. What it takes for us to experience some peace and happiness, and we can see right away what it takes for others to experience peace and happiness. And right now there's a lot of cries, a lot of suffering going on, a lot of despair. And Kshitigarbha, you can find Kshitigarbha all over right now. Kshitigarbha is taking to the streets. Kshitigarbha is in the courtrooms. Kshitigarbha is also in parliament. Kshitigarbha is in families, in schools. so many people doing their best to establish contact with those who cannot find a way out of their suffering, those whose cries for help, justice, equality, and human rights are not being heard. I think you can get in touch with this. I was going back to what's happening in America. I know this is Europe, but that's what's speaking to me right now. About the protests and on racial justice. I was quite moved, actually, by the number of voices that have been raised to bring more awareness and to bring more change into the situation. And quite a number of voices, fearless, quite a number of fearless voices. And the continuation, they're continuing to voice out, to speak out. And it reminded me, and I send my gratitude out to every one of those voices. It also reminded me of you know, in the 60s or 70s maybe, when things about the climate change, when the scientists were barely speaking out about the situation of climate change. Very few voices, very few of their voices were heard. It was very difficult to be heard, but they continued, they persevered. And today we have more and more awareness on climate crisis than ever. But the issue of racial justice, racial injustice, there have been people speaking out for hundreds of years. Sometimes very lone voices. They were very alone in their voices. But yet they continued. And today we have this kind of rising tide. And a real call to action, and we're beginning to see some changes being made, some healing happening. But that's thanks to those Kshitigarbhas speaking out, being there, not abandoning the suffering that's happening. Whether that suffering is happening to the earth or happening to groups of people. They're real bodhisattvas. And there's so many ways for each one of us to also be Kshitigarbhas now, and contributing our voice in the situation. Contributing our voice for change, for healthy change. And you can find out a lot of the ways to do that on the internet as well. But one of the ways that we can also be there is to learn how to take care of our own suffering as well. When we can do that, we can easily identify the suffering that's going on and not be blinded and not avoid the suffering that's going on. So the last bodhisattva, I need to wrap this up, is Sadapariputta, one of my favorite bodhisattvas. We invoke your name, Sadapariputta, We aspire to learn your way of never disparaging or underestimating any living being. With great respect, you say to all you meet, you are someone of great value. You have Buddha nature. I see this potential in you. We will look with a wise, compassionate gaze, so we are able to hold up a mirror where others can see their ultimate nature reflected. We will remind people who feel worthless that they too are a precious wonder of life. We vow to water only the positive seeds in ourselves and in others, so that our thoughts, words, and actions can encourage confidence and self-acceptance in ourselves, our children, our loved ones, and in everyone we meet. Inspired by the great faith and insight that everyone is Buddha, we will practice your way of patience and inclusiveness so we can liberate ourselves from ignorance and misunderstanding and offer freedom, peace, and joy to ourselves, to others, and to our society. Sarabhariputta sounds wonderful. And I have a feeling if I get in contact with Sarabhariputta, I feel great right away because this Bodhisattva is able to identify the best of me. And I think each one of us, we can train ourselves to also be able to identify the best in another person, the gems that we all have. Sometimes when especially when we're having difficulties with someone, it's very difficult to identify that, oh, this person is also a Buddha, or this person also has these wonderful values, these gems. And sometimes we can be blindsided by our difficulties with one another. So we fail to recognize these gems. So that's the action of Sarabhariputta. Can we see that each person is precious? Can we see that each person has value? Can we identify the values in each person? And we help each person to live fully their best values? And also to accept him or her, to accept them as they are. Yesterday, there was a question that came up. How can I accept myself? I have a lot of judgments for myself, and how can I get to a place where I'm not judging myself? How can I get to a place where I can accept myself? I think when we can begin to identify what's wonderful in us, that's already the first step to accepting ourselves. We have to be able to feel, to recognize what's wonderful. If it's really difficult for you to do, you can remember maybe what's wonderful in your parents. What do my parents have that's wonderful that I also have? Because some of us, it's really difficult to identify what's going on well with us. The qualities, the wonderful qualities that we have. That's the first step. The second step is, if you can't identify the wonderful qualities in you and you are constantly judging yourself for not being good enough, etc., mindfulness can help. The moment that we see that we are judging ourselves, we're not good enough in this way or in that way, we can say, it's okay. It's okay. However we are, it's okay. So each moment that non-acceptance is coming up and we have a chance to to be with it. We have a chance to say to ourselves, it's okay. That's an opportunity for us to strengthen our capacity to accept ourselves and to accept others. I see this was a huge problem for me too in the practice, being able to accept myself as I am. But I also see it's a daily training. It's a daily training. And each time that we have an opportunity to do so, we strengthen that capacity. So if you have a lot of self-judgment, if you have a lot of energy, that resistance in accepting ourselves, it's good that it's there. It's not that what I mean is, to get to a place of self-acceptance, you don't have to overcome that obstacle of not accepting yourself. Yes, this moment I don't have the capacity to accept myself. All we need is mindfulness. This moment I don't have the capacity to accept myself, but that's also okay. That's also okay. It's okay. So then we train ourselves in accepting, self-acceptance. And I imagine the Bodhisattva, Sariputta, he did a lot of work in self-acceptance before he was able to accept others. So I wish you a lot of joy in that practice of accepting and loving ourselves, and then accepting and loving others. So these are the 5 bodhisattvas, and they're the 5 qualities of these bodhisattvas, and the 5 different kinds of actions that we can really do to bring about healing for ourselves and our world right now. I wanted to share with you. I hope you can find some time to read them again and to see how these qualities are currently operating in you, how you are currently manifesting these qualities in yourself or in the community, in your family, in the environment in which you are living. I'd like to end today by saying Happy Father's Day. It's Father's Day in America, and I just wanted to say Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, and I wanted to share this. Actually, if you're able to practice these 5 actions, 5 kinds of actions, bodhisattva actions, I thought maybe the first person you can experiment with this on is your father, since it's Father's Day. And I just wanted to share a letter that I wrote to my father. And I try to also practice deep listening, looking deeply, offering joy, etc., to my father. And I'll just show you, because nowadays we have emails and things like that. So I don't know if anybody ever writes letters anymore, but my father passed away 5 years ago, and on his Memorial Day this year, I wrote him this letter. So it's completely possible, if your father has passed away, to celebrate Father's Day. And if he's still alive, and if you could write him a letter, that would also bring a lot of happiness. So this was the letter that I wrote to my father on his Memorial Day. It's quite deceptive in its size. But anyhow, I can't read it to you because I did read it to my mother. And, my mother, because she spent 40-something hours giving birth to me. So my whole life, I have always heard her, especially when I'm being difficult or disagreeable, she would always bring up the 40-something hours of labor. And she was like, oh, no wonder I had to go through 40-something hours. You know, you're so difficult. But this year, when I read this letter to my mother, it was the first time in my life where she said, oh, it was so worth the 40-something hours. So I felt vindicated somehow. And I wanted to share this on Father's Day. It's reconciliation, not only with my father, but I feel with my mother as well. So I hope you find some time to kind of reflect on your relationship with your father and today sometime, and reflect on these actions of a Bodhisattva and see what we can offer. Yes, thank you so much for listening and enjoy your day.